All right. Good afternoon, gamers, and welcome to episode 16 of Games with Dave. Today, I'm joined by the man behind MisAdventure Games, Marc Braden. And Marc right now is kickstarting a super cool horror zine for ZineQuest, MisAdventure Games, the Horror Compendium, which has fully funded and is headed towards its stretch goals. Welcome to the show, Marc. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Dave. It's a pleasure, and I'm excited to do this today.
Awesome. All right. So, sorry, I'm having a slight technical glitch here that I don't know what's going on and why it's not switching over to the screen. Yeah, we're going to just roll with it. So can you tell me what inspired you to create MisAdventure Games and the MisAdventure system?
Sure. So actually, we were just sort of chatting about this, and I was about to tell the story anyway. So good, I don't have to say it twice. I was living in Ukraine, in Lviv, Ukraine, at the time when a couple few years ago, and I was writing a series for Old School Essentials, and the people that I was playing with, we had some, they all spoke English pretty well and everything, but we had some, um, just things going back and forth and whatnot. So we eventually they would ask if they could do something and this and that because they'd mostly played like D&D 5e and stuff, and so some of the older rule sets were new to them for sure. And so I started kind of doing little notes for them, to simplify things. And especially when it came to like magic and some things like that, they would have these great ideas that they wanted their characters to do, but they weren't necessarily in the rules. And so I kind of rewrote the magic system first to be a little more free form and a little bit more flexible for them. And as I was doing that, I had already kind of for a couple years ahead of that been working on a 2d6 system, anyway. And so I was like, let me go ahead and integrate these and start putting these rules together. And so I did that. And then while we were doing it, that they wanted to play a space game. They were we were play testing my for the series of books, the Domain of Miro series, that is all based on Ukrainian folklore. But for some reason, like three of the players were like, "Could we may have play a space game?" And I'm like, "Sure." But instead of having to, like try to teach them Star Frontiers or, because they just don't have copies of these books and stuff, I figured, hey, let me just throw these rules together, and we'll just use those to play this space game. And as we developed it, it just started working so well, and we were having so much fun with it. I decided to go ahead and type them up, and once I did, I realized I had a 34, 36 page book of rules that worked really well and kind of hit all of the points that I kind of like in the game. Um, and That's where it was born.
Nice.
So,
That's awesome. So can we expect to see a space game maybe in the future?
yeah, it's already done. I mean, it's called Atomic Earth. Actually, the it's more of, since it was designed as a kind of a setting for them to play in, as opposed to the other books, which are more compendiums. It's actually kind of a setting, and it's kind of like a weird, um, essentially, Earth was, after the first atomic bomb was dropped, they realized that, oh no, we could destroy ourselves. And instead of going the route that we went, it became a very different society, and everybody sort of drew together. It became, kind of all for one. And then space exploration started. And then unfortunately, one company was working on an invention and accidentally teleports the whole Earth out of our solar system to another solar system. And they have they realized that, there's 4 other planets in the solar system that are all in like the Goldilocks zone, and there's different cultures and different alien cultures. One's all robots, one's like these ant people, and then there's like a kind of a lost world kind of planet that and those civilizations are all about the same place where Earth was. So just starting to send out spaceships, just so you don't have like, so it's very golden age, like Flash Gordon-y kind of, um, a little bit of Buck Rogers, ray guns and stuff like that. And then you still have like vibro swords and stuff and things. And little small spaceships with just 2 people in them, that go around. And so it's it's fun. It's a little, it's still kind of got some exploration. Then you've got some politics with the other planets, first encounter. I set the timeline to start right at first encounter.
Oh,
So
nice.
that way, we in the MisAdventure series, we call the person running the game the guide. So the guide sort of has you've got descriptions of each planet and what's going on, and then you can sort of create your own setting from there. So there's just been first contact, and so it's like, maybe they're work the players could be explorers, they could be in the military, they could be politicians, they could be, there's a lot of different, things. There's 2 or 3 factions on Earth, so you can have internal politics on Earth as well. And so I like it. It was fun. It was a good, we had a good time playing it and stuff, and it's all done.
Nice.
So
Well, I can't wait for that. Sorry, I kind of pulled us off
yeah.
track a little bit with that one,
No,
but
no, no, that's okay. That's okay. I think everybody that's asked me that question, they're like, "Well, why didn't you start with that one?"
so for folks that might be new to MisAdventure Games that are just coming across it from finding the horror compendium on Kickstarter, can you give a summary of the system? Is really the best way I could come up with asking that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I made it so that, first of all, I should mention it is in Creative Commons. It's the core rule book is just the core rules. So there's no fantasy elements, there's no space elements, there's no um it's just the rules. And I encourage people to just pick it up and hack it and use it any way they like. It's built around a few different core concepts. So it's you build your character um with a point buy system, which I think you had a question about that
Yep.
later, so I won't, elaborate it. But and then it's all 2d6 rolls with a difficulty rating system. And then essentially it's a rollover system. If roll over the 2d6 over the difficulty rating and you succeed. Under, you fail. Double ones, critical fail. You get 12 critical success. And then and that's it. You can get bonuses through a few different ways, either through your stats can add, pluses, or if you have a skill that's applicable, or if you have a foci, which is a part of building your character. So, which we can, certainly discuss, in the character, building characters or whatever.
Absolutely.
But that's it. It's really simple, and I liked it that way because it worked. For me, the way I like to be a guide and the way I like to DM is very on the fly. I mean, for years I used to run a group. Um, they wanted to play 5e when it came out, but they wanted to play all the classic, like the classic. They gave me a lit. They saw my collection, which is all in storage, and they were like, "Jesus, you've got every single I think I have all but like 12 of all the original AD&D, modules,
Wow.
and stuff. And they they're like, oh, could you run, two horrors? Could you run this one? Could you run that one? And that blah blah blah. And I'm like, sure. And I never converted one. I never sat down. I grabbed the monster manual for 5e. I grabbed the rules, and then I just winged it. Here's your this, and so I like that for this system. I like that. If they want to do something and it's something that should require a roll, just pick a difficulty rating and tell them roll over an 8. Roll over a 7. Like whatever it is using this, and there you go. Super quick, super simple. Not a lot of math or anything to figure out there. So, and that's it. That way it frees up for other gaming uh things. As far as the rest of the rule set, I mean, it's a mixture of some new ideas, some old ideas. Armor acts as armor reduction instead of help. Like, so you're easier to hit because only thing that helps you in that category is your dexterity. So you may be easier to hit, but if you've got better armor, it reduces the points of damage off of it. Both of the fantasy and the space, actually all the systems have an optional rule that if you want to have armor be damaged, only be able to take so many hits before you need to repair it. There is an optional rule for that. If you'd like to use it, use it. If you don't. Depends on how much of a challenge or how hard you want to make it on your players, really. And then their encumbrance system is just a simple slot system. You can carry this many items, and if you go above that, then you suffer in the dex category. And yeah, it's just you try. Rules are just meant really to be super. The distances are kind of it's close and near, and it's not the rule. The distances are all kind of abstract, so that you
Gotcha.
don't have to be so worried about that and whatnot. So yeah, it's really meant to be run really quickly, easily resolves. If something, certain things may even just give you automatic successes, which is nice. A mathematician isn't going to sit there and struggle with 2 plus 2,
No.
you know, for example, so yeah,
Nice. Well, I love how simple it seems, and the 2d6 system is very familiar for people to just be able to
yeah,
pick up 2 6-sided dice, roll them,
that,
and be like, well, I got an 8, I succeeded. Oh no, I got snake eyes, I failed.
yes,
It's
exactly. And I love the bell curve on it, to be honest. I like the way, um, I like the way that bonuses affect the bell curve, because I mentioned the foci. So I guess you want to
yeah,
talk
let's talk
about
about the foci for
character
sure.
creation. That might help a little bit
Yeah.
with any of the rest of the discussion. So character creation is pretty simple. You get a certain amount of points to build your character, and there's a suggestion in there. 15 is the suggested for a adventurer who's sort of been trained, been ready to go out in the world. If you wanted to make the character less trained or 0 level, then they would start with like 5. Somewhere in the middle, they start with 10. If you wanted to play some like epic god level characters or something, you could give them whatever, 20 or 25 points, and then let them go from there. Each character, it's got your standard 6 abilities, because I wanted it to be OSR compatible. You could certainly use any of the monsters or any of the stuff in there with other games. They'll
Nice.
slot in very well. And if you've got a base understanding of like red box rules or old school essentials, you'll pick up on these rules in minutes. It'd be super easy to play. Then you've got 3 slots that you can have max for foci. So what I did is I wanted to not really have I wanted to have broad classes because I had come up with the idea of the roots a long time ago and wanted to use it. So roots are like in each setting or each genre, like the very broad core of something. So in the fantasy setting, you've got the mighty, which, as it sounds, is anybody that is martially inclined. Doesn't matter if they're a barbarian, a knight, a squire, a ranger, or whatever. Anything that's physically prowess and stuff is the mighty. If you want to use magic, then you pick the magical as your character base. And that would cover anything that does with magic. And then you've got the misguided. And so that is anything like a rogue or a bard
Nice.
or a nobleman or a thief or a whatever, whatever else. And under each of those categories, I've given you a whole list of different foci, and the max you can ever have is 3 for your character. And I would recommend they cost 2 build points at when you build your character. They cost 3 if you want to add it later on. So it's smart to go ahead and use 6 of like your 15 points right away to pick up those.
Exit out right off the.
Exactly. Just go ahead and pick up your 3 foci, unless you want to play with a couple and then learn one later on because you want to see how your character goes or whatever. And the foci are like kind of game changer. We recommend in the books that every character take kind of a physical one. They take a story, like a story based one, and then like a knowledge one. So, and that way your character is sort of balanced out. Now you could certainly, I don't know, like take a mighty character from the fantasy setting and say he was put into gladiator training at a young age and all he's ever done is fight. And so he's got 3 fighting moves or whatever. You could but it's all up to you. Do whatever you want. It's your character. I mean, it's just our suggestion to make them a little bit more well-rounded, and stuff. And then you pick a couple. You probably have a few points to put in your stats, a few points to pick a few skills, and that's it. Calculate your hit points and your wealth depending on where you're starting. And there's little packages of starting equipment for each group, and that's it. I mean, you're ready to play. I mean, it's really a matter of just reading through, picking what you want, and then placing a few points. I mean, it's never taken me or anybody else longer than 20 minutes to make a character.
Yeah, I was going to say it seems like it's about a 15-20 minute process tops.
Now, magic is the only place where that may. So then the rest of the book works like this. So it's really a build it yourself set of rules. There are no magic spell lists. And not because I couldn't sit here and write 1,000 spells after playing, games since 83 or 84. I mean, like I could write all the standard spells in the world if I, or whatever, rename them and whatever, this or that. But that was always one of my problems. Also, was just that magic and stuff just had this. I guess after playing, like I love DCC, how they at least did something different with it, so that it was dangerous again. That it was exciting again. And so that's really the only rule set that I've really liked as far as that goes for a while. But I didn't want to just copy it, or anything. So what I decided to do was have it be more character driven and more personalized. So so even in the horror book, there's five magic types in there. There's 5 presented in the fantasy book, and there's charts in the back of the book that suggest the like there's a damage chart, and it says, so essentially like a what would be a, like basically like a level 1 powered spell um would do 1d3 damage on,
Yep.
and then it will have a suggestion on, like if it was, say it was telekinesis, it'll have like a weight, like this is about what a one level first level spell should be able to move or pick up, or so. And then what we do in the books, in the compendiums, is we say, okay, well, there's um a druid, and I mean, let me I'll go off of the horror book here, like since that's the one that's kickstarting. So let's just say if you um picked let's say faith, uh for example, like say you decided your character was had faith, which is essentially you know you believe in something, and you're able to focus it, and there's explanations in there of how to handle this, and a warning too about, especially with real world religions and stuff, if you want to leave it vague and just say your character is pure of heart and can turn a vampire, then
Right.
great. If you want to say you're a Catholic and you're this or that, and that's where you draw your power from, then go for it. Be as detailed as you want. And of course, I prefer that because in there I have that, if you do choose to declare what your faith is, then if your character breaks that faith, then they can get penalties to whether they can use their abilities or not, and stuff. So, because I think that there should be consequences if if for role playing. I mean, role playing should be part of the game,
Right.
and
Absolutely.
you can't, yeah. And so like, what it is like, so like faith has a section, it just says common powers, and it says, this is a general list of what a person of faith may accomplish, and players are encouraged to create their own uses, blah, 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 you know. And so, for example, their first one is a light in the dark. So you can use your focus and your faith and you can create light. And then under it, it says DUR and DIS. So that's duration and distance. So if you decided that your character tap into their inner faith and create light, then at first you would use the duration and distance charts that are in the core book, and you'll know how far it can go and how long it can last based on the level of spell it is.
Gotcha.
And yeah, so, and you do that with anything. So you can create anything you want. I mean, so we've got everything from, disperse spirit, you've got read aura, you've got repulse evil, sense evil, a holy weapon. And then there are in both of the books, there are things like that that are what we call boons. So, like, if you take some of the foci might be a boon, and it might be an item. So, like if you were a mighty, you might take the foci where you get to start with a magical heirloom weapon that was handed down by your father. Now, the obvious problem there is that yes, you're going to get a static bonus or whatever right from the very beginning for as long as you have that thing. But the challenge is that if you lose it, it's
It's
lost,
gone. Yeah.
Right. So there's a trade-off there. And I believe in that. I mean, I think there ought to be like, look, this is a powerful thing to take because right away you've got this great magical item. But if you lose it, then you know
It's
it's hard
gone.
to
Yeah.
replace. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So magic works like that in both the fantasy compendium. I mean, like there's necromancy in there. There's druids. There's blessed by the divine, which would be any kind of cleric, or someone that draws their power from the faith. There's wizards, and then there's sorceress in there. And then in the horror book, I mean, we've got alchemy, which is useful. I mean, you can with alchemy, you can make concoctions. So you can make potions, you can make salves, you can make dust and whatever. And here but then you have to follow certain rules in there to create them, and then costs and stuff. So it's not like, if you take alchemy, you can just pop out 1,000 potions. Like if yeah, if your character happens to be in the horror book, it's set in the modern world. So I did add professions to it. So you could say, well, I'm a college teacher. I work at a Starbucks. I work at a bookstore. I'm an architect. You can pick different things, and depending on you can also be everyday people, which is a whole new class in the horror book, which is essentially a 0 level character. um, because if you want to run like a Call of Cthulhu game with the rules, there's an easy hack in there for it. I mean, essentially everybody's everyday people. They get a couple skills. They get one foci, which is basically it's been a while. Essentially, what did I call it? I called it something funny. I can't. Um, yeah, if you're an everyday people, oh, you get dumb luck.
Dumb luck.
So
Yes, that's right.
dumb luck, yeah, and it's that classic horror trope that you know when you're screaming, no, no, he should be dead right now, no, it essentially gets you out of one, like right as the vampire is about to grab you, the tree limb breaks and falls on the vampire, and you're able to escape. It's whatever it might be, in the situation. So you get one moment where you're just like, and it's once per adventure. You're just like, you've got that moment of dumb luck where you're like, you can get, save yourself. But then there's rules in there for fear and then madness. I mean, obviously, every creature comes with a horror factor, and when you first encounter that, you need to roll over it. If you don't, then you suffer horror damage, and if you once you've suffered a certain amount of horror in your career, you start to either develop permanent fears, first temporary fears, then permanent fears. Permanent fears can lead to madness. And so, and then there's charts in there for a bunch of fun ones. And then I would encourage you to pick up Call of Cthulhu and use their charts, or anything else that you might like to use.
Man, this system sounds so fun.
Yeah, it's really easy too, though. I mean, it's probably way more easy than I'm making it sound. I mean, but
I think you're making it sound easy as can be. So, I mean, I'm used to a lot of really crunchy games, and
yeah.
there's like
No,
a light
yeah.
crunch to this, but not too much.
No, and like I said, a lot of it's all based off the DR roll. So and maybe a couple of them, like with the horror. Like I said, I added in. You couldn't have a horror game without I mean, madness, and
Right.
without fear and stuff. So I mean, I had to add a little bit of rules onto that. Since it was a modern game, I added on professions, instead of like just standard wealth for the fantasy compendium. It was just kind of standard wealth and starting wealth, and your position in society. But with this one, it's just professions, and you can literally be anything from it starts with professions. It starts with allowance, which most likely you're a kid because you have a little pocket money available. You have just a little pocket money, and then starting equipment, a walkie-talkie, a tent, a flashlight, whatever you can, borrow from the garage or school, So, you can literally play anything from that to independently wealthy, and so you can really set up your and then each of these books has a the main core book has, I didn't want it, the skill list to be super big, at all. Like so, each everything but Constitution has like two skills that are associated with it, and then each book adds one or two to each thing to round out for the setting. So that makes sense. So in fantasy, you've got certain skills that would be, you know, uh, appropriate for that, blacksmithing or
Right.
things like something like that. In a space game, you might, obviously not everybody knows how to, fly the rocket ship. So you need to have a little bit of skills there for that kind of thing to get some, differences in character. So the same with this game, you've got a few additional skills, and then each one, like I said, has each book has a few little option, one page of optional rules to add to the core book. So, in the horror book, we've got an advancement method that really brings them up slowly and even can cap their hit points. You can even we cap like hit points at 3 die. So the max you could ever have, and that's if you choose to. When you get experience points, you can choose to put them where you want. So it's not like you get to level 2, you automatically get a hit die and a skill or anything. If a guide says, okay, if you survive each adventure or each session, I'm going to give you 1 or 2 points, whatever. It's up to you to decide, do you want to save them? Do you want to go ahead and sink them into something? Maybe you want to save up for something. And then you have to decide what you want. I'm a mage. Do I want another spell? Do I want my spell? Do I want to go to level 2 in spells? But I'm kind of squishy. Should I get another hit die first? A
Right.
fighter might say, a fighter has to make that same decision. They might get their first batch of points and say, do I want to attack better? Or do I want to be able to take more punishment? And so you've got to make some. So not every character's the same, and like I said with magic, you just don't know. Like with magic, you have no clue what kind of. I mean, I could build a wizard and choose teleportation spell, a fireball, and a lockpick spell. Create those 3 spells for myself at the beginning. You may take, what are your 3 favorite spells? Like it could be for anything from 1 through 9. I mean,
Let's
or
see.
any
Sleep would be a good one. Um,
and you can create something out of your own imagination that does anything. A
I
giant
like
fist.
teleportation. That's one that you stole that from me.
Okay.
So,
That's okay.
and it's funny because I was actually going to say fireball, but I would probably use something like magic missile or something along those lines.
Right. But it could be any kind of, right. Okay. It could be that let's say you're playing an elf character and you're a wild elf, then y'all um worship eagles. So instead of magic missile, it's these glowing eagle birds that come and
Ooh,
fly at people and hit them. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, or something. So you can give it whatever flavor you want and stuff, and call it whatever you know name you want to
The
call it.
golden eagle spell or something like that and have
Exactly,
it.
exactly. And you're the only wizard that may know that's what's fun. Because when another wizard comes up, they're going to be like, can he blast me? Maybe all he knows is defensive spells. Maybe he only knows how to do transformation spells. You just don't know what that, you know what I mean? You run into that sorcerer and, or that necromancer that's been causing a lot of trouble. Well, there's 20 or so ideas from the necromancer spell list that they could use, that they could have just from what I've provided. Who knows what the player may have come up with? You know what
Right.
I mean?
Right.
Like, and so you meet that necromancer, and there's an element of danger there. There's an element of uh-oh.
Yeah,
I
because
mean,
it's completely unknown what you're walking into. So,
exactly right. And so, like as far as spell casting goes, you get your level plus your every magic is attached to one of the six uh, abilities, and it's not always the same. It's not always intelligence, you know. Like in this, rich summoners need to be strong because physically fit to be to the things that in summoning in this and the powers here kind of works. I based it a little off, I have to say, off of like Elric and stuff. So
Okay.
essentially, you make deals with like, so let's say you want to say you want a fireball type of spell. Well, you need to conjure a fire elemental, match your wits against their wits. And if you roll over it, then you can summon them a certain amount of times to cast that spell and use their power before. And then the better you roll against that, um, the higher you roll, you can get up to use that spell up to a year. So, or as little as a month. If you fail on that roll, then you may go a little bit mad for a while or get a fear for a little while. Or if you really fail on it, you could end up their slave for a while. And so
Oh
there's
man.
there's, yeah. So you got to be careful. Like it's magic that has consequences, as far as that goes. And the magics in the horror compendium are a little bit more realistic. I mean, they're magic, so how, but they're more what I feel with like alchemy. Like to make alchemy spell, there's a list of bases that you have to have: water, vinegar, this or that. That explain, and then there's explains what that does. Then there's a whole list of like uh anything from basil to arrowroot to dragon's foot to all kind of things, and it tells what quality or what that does. And then you have to add something fun to the spell, like to make, like, say, a spell that's going to give you a boost of energy, right? Maybe you add coffee to the recipe. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
an energy drink, or whatever. And you have to pick two of the other things, so that'll come to the cost. Like, well, water's obviously can be free for the most part, but if you don't have a bottle of vinegar around to make a spell, you need to go to the store and buy a bottle of vinegar. And then you may need to spend some money on the other ingredients. And so if you got to imagine like somebody that chooses to be an alchemist as part of their selves, there's a big difference between someone that's, like I said, a young kid with the allowance doing it, and someone that is independently wealthy. They could get all of the rare ingredients and stuff, whereas this person may not be able to, or may have to save up to make these spells, or potions.
Right.
And so, and then with those, you have to roll over to make the potion correctly. There's a chance you could screw the potion up and it's
And then just
useless.
poof, it blows, or it
Right,
blows up in your
exactly.
face, or
Exactly, yeah. So, um, so there's that. And then with like I said, for the additional, so then when we were speaking of magic, sorry. So with that though, like I said, everything's tied to it. So if you have like level 1 in alchemy, and then or whatever it is, and then you have uh, like faith is wisdom, is based off of wisdom. So let's say you have 2 points in wisdom and you have 1 point in faith. Well, that gives you 3. So that means you can cast up to 3 spells per day at level 1. No chance of failure, no chance of whatever. Now, what you could choose to do also, though, is that if you want to not use that, you are allowed to roll against it. There is a difficulty rating for spells of level 1, 2, and 3, and you could try to roll over that, and you get to add your bonus. Like your wisdom was at 2, you would have a +2, and so I think it starts at 8, 9, and 10. And if you roll over an 8, you can cast whatever spell you want, and it doesn't take up one of your slots. So there's a chance that you can cast as much as you want.
There's just
Um,
risk involved.
there's just risk involved. You may be right in the middle of things, but you're like, oh man, we're stuck in the bottom of this haunted house in this dungeon. Who knows when we're getting out? I better conserve my automatic, you know what I mean? My automatic ones until I absolutely need them, and I'm going to take a chance. And then there's a way to sacrifice some of your health points and your other stuff. Like you hit that moment where you're just the big bad is just trouncing you, and you're like, oh my god, I need a boost of power. I've got the perfect spell against, he's weak against light. I've got this light spell, but I really need to blast him. You can try to roll it above what you know, you can try to roll against the level 3 and really boost that spell and take some hit off of yourself for a while. But you've got that option too for those desperate moments.
That's really
So
cool because I kind of picture someone doing that, like, boom, casting this light spell that's amped up and then kind of watching, like, maybe their hair gray or something like that a little bit from
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
that is really
So
cool.
yeah, so I wanted to add some of some storytelling stuff in there, some story element that gives it that moment that everybody. You always like that in games, but like so often, like with traditional games, it's like, oh, I got to roll a 20 to get that moment,
Right.
or whatever. Here you can sort of create your own because that's what the foci are for. They're not abilities you can only use them once per day per level you have. So at first level, you can only use it once per day. And so you just gotta wait for that. The fighter is just like hacking away. And then there's that moment, like in Conan, when the monster, the god is coming, and then he's gotta win, and gets his sword and he gets it right up through the throat and
Yep.
through the head, and stuff. Like so if you've got like that kind of epic attack, or like monstrous strike, or whatever. Unfortunately, I'm concentrated on the horror one right now, so I don't have the fantasy one but pulled up. But there's like an epic attack type of move, and it gives you, if you use it, it gives you a +1 and like an extra roll on of a hit die, and and stuff. And so, and with that bell curve, you're almost even a +1 on that bell curve is huge to move that needle, and that's what those foci are for. Those moments when you
Just
know,
gotta succeed or whatever, you
right. I
know?
want to jump off the cliff and hit, stab the dragon right through the throat, and and whatnot. And I'm going to use this foci to do it. And it's like, okay, and you got your bonuses and you got your extra damage, and and then
Yeah.
there it goes. There's that epic moment. So you get to create using those things. You get to kind of create, you know, some moments and stuff. So
I feel like this actually offers a few more opportunities to have those epic moments with the bell curve versus, like you were saying, I need to get the 20 to do this. With this
right.
way, with having your foci and that bell curve, you could hit it and have, well, like I was saying, have a better chance of doing it with having the foci versus having to say, oh, I've got to
Yeah.
get double sixes for this to happen.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. This gives you that extra boost. I mean, and gives you that, just that momentum. And like I said, the foci are not all, they're not all, by any means just, oh, just dumb. Let me attack kind of stuff. I mean, they're very, they're varied. So I mean, you've got the investigator class in the new horror book, and this would be like John. Like the examples are like John and Dean Winchester from Supernatural, or
Yep.
Nada from They Live, or Buffy, or Ripley. And these are kind of, the investigator is more of the one that is more of the fighter class of the horror.
Right. Take the fight to them versus wait for it to.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but they've got some, awareness, and it's one that they can do. And so if they use awareness for 10 minutes per level of that, they can't be surprised. So if you're going into that haunted house, or you're going into that you know, vampire lair, you could activate that, and you're just hyper focused, and you know what I mean. You're not going to get caught, off guard. But then they and then like I kind of made this one after Dean Winchester. Yeah, one is called "I Read a Little," and and it's, while not as well read as other routes, you do study your potential foes. Choose a broad type of adversary. By the adversaries in my games are the bestiary. So everything's an adversary instead of calling them beasts and stuff. So but you got undead, demons, witches, etc. For each level acquired. When hunting, you can use this foci to gain advantage on the rolls. Oh, you can get advantage where you get to roll 3 6-sided dice and choose the best 2, or disadvantage rolling 3 and picking the worst 2. There is that in there too. And so that's a great, this is a great thing, to use when you um when you are hunting a certain creature or whatever, you could use that. You're really good at hunting demons. Their weaknesses. Their uh, the ins and outs of fighting against them. And so you've got all kind of different things. I mean, for the intellect class, this was based a lot off of Sherlock Holmes. And then I don't know if you're familiar with like Dr. Goodwin. I mean, The Moon Pool is an old 20s or 30s book.
I'm not.
Yeah, he wrote a whole bunch of really good stuff. But Dr. Goodwin was the main character in 2 of them. Then like this would be Sam Winchester, and then Sherlock Holmes, if I didn't say that. Like, so this one, the intellect is sort of a combination of that. You could make them just really smart character, but you can also make them a combination like Sherlock. I mean, Sherlock was, yes, he was smart, but he could use a gun. He
Right.
could sword fight, he could do, but then he also had his problems, his drug problems and stuff. And so like you can pick a quirk in this, and essentially you have to pick an addiction, of quirk, a vice. It could be drugs, could be sacrifice or pain or a compulsion or whatever. And as long as you role play your character, you always get a +1 to all your rolls. So like if you want to say I'm a drunk, then you need your character
Needs to be a drunk.
needs to be a drunk.
But again, that helps with that bell curve of getting
It
that
does, yeah.
+1 so that
It does, yeah. But then if you decide to pick, and then there's some suggestions in there, like to the guide, if he is a drunk and if he's middle class, well, then you know what I mean? He might, and he lives alone, he might start having trouble paying rent. He might start having, there's role playing opportunity in there, as well, to bring your character and bring the setting, kind of to life, like you can pick this, but it's got some obvious disadvantages too,
right.
to it. I mean, yeah, you're getting something good, but yeah,
There are some drawbacks.
yeah. I mean, and as there should be. I mean,
Yep. Oh,
like,
absolutely. I
yeah,
agree.
I
Yeah.
try to not pull, I mean, I try to make the games as fun as possible, but also, I mean, I do try to incorporate. I mean, I'm a big, unfortunately, I mean, when life, I mean, there's a certain amount of drama creates a certain amount of, tension, and a certain amount of, you know, danger. And to me, I like those games, or those, that kind of role playing. I mean, I
Yeah.
like Call of Cthulhu. I mean, because I know my character's gonna go mad, and
Right.
that's the fun. It's not for everybody, but I mean, you've got that with this system, and especially with this horror system, you've got that opportunity. Like I said, you can play in everyday people, route, and you're essentially your hit points are never going to get any better. You got a couple skills, you got your profession, and you got your dumb luck,
I was
and
just gonna
that's
say, and
all.
you got your dumb luck.
Yeah.
So
And yeah, and there's a little mention of funnel games. I mean, you could certainly start a game like this with, a game where you make 3 or 4 everyday people, and then whichever ones survive become an investigator, become a intellect or an inquisitive, and they can grow into one of the main routes. So you can certainly play it that way as well. I mean, that's certainly a very viable option, for the game. So
nice. Dude, I'm loving everything I'm hearing about this. So I
yeah.
like that it's grounded, that there's a lot of there. I love the whole bell curve idea. I love the foci. And we talked about a little bit about the roots and everything. So what actually made you decide to go the horror route versus maybe the space route?
Um, it's it's just a subject I really like, I guess.
Nice.
I mean, honestly, I got on like we were talking ahead of time. I mean, I'm currently living in Romania, so and I'm not currently working, so uh, I had a lot of time on my hands, and to be honest, I started watching. I I I knew I wanted to do the horror book, or I wanted to do the space book, um, and really what it came down to was two things. Like I said, I had too much time on my hand, and when I cooked dinner every night, I was working my way through rewatching all 17 seasons of Supernatural.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I was on that kick again after a bunch of years, and plus I was reading. I had just reread all the Sherlock Holmes books. And then I had reread Lovecraft just recently, like last year. And so in my head, a lot of that was all kind of bubbling there and a bunch of ideas. And then, as you know from the art from the book, it's all golden age comic book art that's been reworked and stuff. And I had already been going through all the public domain art and pulling out all of these images that I wanted to rework and clean up and crop and and do stuff with. And so, I mean, and there's just so many good horror comics from the 20s and
Oh, yeah.
30s and stuff. And I was just finding all this great stuff. And I was like, man, I got to do the horror book. The kicker came down to another book that I was just finishing, but I didn't want to release it till I released the horror book. I got, while I was in the Ukraine living on my little farm, I got on a big iceberg conspiracy kick for a while. And so I started to make a book called The Iceberg Conspiracy. And essentially, what it is it's a bunch of random tables that lets you create a city by just rolling dice, like a modern or a horror city. And so, what it does is it breaks the city down into sections, of whatever you want to use in it. And it's got suggestions on creating your own city or taking a real city and converting it. And then what you do is, like, for each area, you roll a couple dice, and you might get, city hall and the fire station, in the city center. Then you might get the Paul records and a lawyer office in the administrative area. Then in the suburbs, you might get, I don't know, the Reebok store and I don't know where Chili's. There's Chili's all over the United
Yeah.
States. I'm trying to think of chains that would be everywhere. And then you might get out in the boonies, you might get an abandoned farm and creepy mansion. And then you roll for all those, and then you get layers of story built, like with just a few rolls. All of a sudden, you've got all of these areas, and you've got a whole city to tell a story in. And then like each area has like there's a whole list of like all of the iceberg conspiracy, and you just roll. It's well right now. I started with just D66 table of them, a lot of my favorites, and you just roll. And so you might have in the civic, in the civic center, city center, you might have an Philadelphia experiment going on. And then in the suburbs, you might have a coven of vampires or a coven of witches or something, and then um, birds really aren't real. like, like, you know what I mean? Like, whatever it is, you get some weird thing for each thing. And so then the guide or the DM or however, this one's kind of this one's neutral, it's going to be put out under MisAdventure Games, but it's system neutral, because it's really just a bunch of charts to build these weird horror cities. So once you've got your map, you've got all these little locations, you've got some weird characters and weird names and weird people, and you've got this, then you can just let your characters go in there and just find the weird, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
however they could, maybe your characters are all journalists. Maybe they're kids, that just stumble upon the first thing, and then the first thing leads to the next thing, and then that leads to it's just a way to design a city really quick for horror play that gives you a bunch of options. And so I'm really close. Right now, I'm just doing the maps for it, the sample maps and the sample city and stuff. And so I was like, well, I really need the horror book to go with. The horror book and this were meant to be together. So I didn't want to go another 3 or 4 months till the next Kickstarter, ZineQuest, or I didn't want to put MisAdventure Games aside, for that long, without support. So I decided to release the horror one, so then I could release the system neutral book that sort of goes with it here, in a few months. I mean, so that's why I went with the horror book over the
Nice.
space book for now.
I
Yeah.
can't wait for the system neutral book to come out. That's going to be freaking awesome. So
It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of weirdness in it and stuff, and I'm really happy. I've rolled up a few little cities, and I'm like, man, I gotta find a group of people to play with.
oh, it's so funny that you said birds aren't real, because I've got a group of my friends that are always jokingly posting like birds aren't real, and
Right.
that just killed me when you said that.
Right. Well, right. That's yeah. So that's why I went with it, because I thought the synergy between the two of them would be really nice. And and then it'd give me a little time on the um I've got like 3 projects in the works, and that I'm trying to decide what order to go in. And so these two just slotted so nicely together that it was like, and then like I said, they were both essentially ready to go. So it just made sense to go ahead and do these right now together, and then I'll do, probably do. I'll do that, and then I may just, I don't know if I'll even kickstart the space book. I may just release it, you know, straight out since it's done and stuff. I don't know yet. I'll just have to see on that. You know,
Cool.
that yeah.
All right. So we've actually answered a lot of my questions. I got to take a quick scan through my sheet. One of the things was the art, and I had actually messaged you prior to us. I think it was back when we were first starting to talk about having you on. And
Right.
I said that the cover reminded me of the Hardy Boys. And that was the first thing I thought of. And I was flipping, I was flipping through I shouldn't say flipping, I was scrolling through the PDF. And I was just like, oh man, this reminds me of those old like Tales of Adventure and Tales of Horror comics, like you were saying, from the 20s. And yeah, back this, because just aesthetically, this book is so awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I love working with artists. I've had the pleasure of working with some really good ones in the Ukraine, and then unfortunately, it's hard to get in touch with them right now and be get stuff done and everything. Uh, the the um, the artist that did the cover, I think one of your next questions was who did the character sheet.
Yes.
Yeah. Cala de Selva did the cover and the character sheets for both books. Well, sorry, he did the cover for this book and then did the character sheets for both books. Um, a younger kid from Brazil who I've been working with for a while. I've actually got a bunch of his art for another project that I'm hoping to get released at some point for the fantasy, a follow up to the fantasy setting. A bunch of um, uh, I just forgot who they were. My brain. I hate when your brain Babylonian. Sorry, a bunch of Babylonian inspired art and stuff that he did for me for it, for another island to go with the fantasy setting, and he's amazing. He posts on a lot of the websites and stuff, but I would certainly recommend him to anybody. He's a good kid, does good work. Be good to see him get some love. Then another young gentleman from Brazil, Felipe, he does all of my layout for me and stuff. Me and him have been working. He's yeah, about to graduate from college that's what he goes to school for, and he actually did the first two misadventure books for his his graduation project. He
Oh,
did the
nice.
layout for him and used them as his I guess they had to do a project and put something together. And so I paid him, but I mean, he used it, he doubled it up as his project for school too. And he did the cover art for the original Misadventure Core book as well. Um, so I try to work with as many. I worked with Caleb Ingle. He's done a lot of stuff with Cyborg, and so he just did a Kickstarter called Korg recently, a little um, like business card game
Oh, cool.
and stuff. And he started and he did all the fantasy book work, and then Jay Shields did some of the work for the fantasy book as well. For this one, I went totally back to Golden Age comic public domain art because I wanted that specific feel. Like I wanted those artists and stuff, and I wanted that. Yeah, I wanted it to be consistent all the way through. So I chose to, other than the cover, I decided to go all public domain art in this one, just because of strictly because of aesthetics. I mean, there's just a difference between that old grainy
Yeah.
art and stuff. I think it just pops really well, and it just had the feel that I wanted this horror book to have that sort of feel. I mean, there's plenty of Call of Cthulhu. I mean, I would never say anything bad about it. I mean, I love it as a system. I love the game, and it does that cosmic horror great, and it's got a certain, it has that, but although they've started to make things in other eras, it's got that sort of time period that you kind of associate, with it. For this, I really wanted this. I wanted people when they were playing it to flip through and just have sort of that old timey comic feel in their head. Not manga or not you know not as much as I love like early black and white D&D art, like I didn't want it to have that feel. I didn't want it to have like a cyberpunk or a gothic punk, kind. I wanted it to have that classic, like well, here's a vampire, here's your classic cape and fangs and
Amulet and everything. Yeah.
exactly right. A mummy just looks like this, a werewolf looks like that and and stuff. So I just wanted to have that sort of feel to it. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, the man hours of just finding the art. I mean, there's, eh, you know, going through and finding the pictures you need. So I would hate to know how many hours I spent, scavenging through comic books and reading old comic books to find everything. But
Dude, you nailed it with the art. Like I was saying to you before we went on, it took me back to being like a 10 to 12-year-old kid flipping through those old horror comics when I was a kid. And I was just like, oh my God, this book is so cool. And
thanks. Well,
uh,
good. Then I accomplished what I was
yeah, you
going.
really have. Like
I
I
mean,
said,
I
you
wanted a
nailed
certain
it.
aesthetic. I just wanted it to be a little bit different than everything's. There's a certain amount of books now that are kind of that art, kind of art house look and stuff, and I like them. They're cool and this and that, but this I just wanted to have kind of a sleek kind of look and then that art, style. I mean, I just wanted something a little different than what else other stuff that I see. So
Nice. Another thing that you've actually got in here that I don't recall us fully touching on, like we kind of touched on the adversaries a little bit, but are the adventure locations. And my favorite from being a kid, and like I was telling you before we went on, I listened to that old Disney haunted house record. It's like it's a dark and stormy night and stuff like that. Um, what was your favorite of, like, for me, what really spoke out, like the haunted house for me was my favorite. And it was how simple it was. It was 8d6 rolls to build a haunted house.
correct. Once again, I wanted it to be I wanted the book I kind of mentioned beforehand. I mean, the whole series is somewhere between something that where a not I you see in the chats and this and that, like all these people that are trying to run games, trying to find guides or PMs for games, and all the work that goes into having to do this. And I wanted to simplify and make it easy for these people, so there's stuff in there that you might read through if you've been 30 years or 20 years or even 10 years. There might be some advice in there that's like, okay, I know this, you know what I mean? But then again, maybe there's something in there that'll spur your imagination too, And so like so when I was doing the adversaries, for this book, I mean, yeah, I could have just filled it up with a bunch of monsters, and whatnot. But in horror, location is almost, I mean, it's so often just as important. I mean, the graveyard, a haunted house, dealing with a cult. I love the cursed item section
Yeah.
personally. I think you can have a lot of fun with that. That can be the impetus to a whole campaign, is one of the players picking up one of the cursed items, or someone they love getting the cursed item, and then that's how you got into this world, was to save your loved one, or whatever, get enough knowledge together to break that curse, And so, and then what I decided early on that I wanted to have a certain amount of those kind of things in the game that help a guide easily design an adventure. So yeah, I like the haunted house. I mean, I just decided, I thought, okay, I took a piece of paper, wrote down haunted house, and then just started writing down typical tropes, typical things, or just odd stuff that and then I realized that I started having different categories of things, of what you would find in it, what kind of house it is, what's special about the house, who is it haunted by, why did they haunt it, blah blah blah. And I was like, cool. And so you made the charts. The same with like there's so many great books out there on how to make a cult, for your game. And, there's so many great books by so many great writers and stuff, but someone that's just coming into the game, I mean, they need roll 6 dice and know that, they've got a
Yeah.
cult that's led by one individual, that's made up by all women, that, does this. They meet this often, and this is who they were, this is what they worship. Or, it's led by a duo of people. Their, mixture is 50-50. There's so many people in it, and blah, and you can just roll so many combinations on there and get a bunch of simple ideas for cults in just a few rolls, and hopefully when you roll that up, you go, yeah, like if you decide, okay, I want to have a cult, that's operating out of the local bookstore. Well, what do? Oh, boom, 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 boom. There we go. There's my cult, and then you're ready to go. And then same with, like you said, with the local haunted house. Well, what's it? How's it? What is it? How's it haunted? Blah, blah, blah. Roll a few dice, you get a haunted house. And you're like, okay, now I've got a cult that operates out of the bookstore. I've got this haunted house. I know a vampire lives here. I've got this. And then you let your players start to connect. You give them a little line and let them start adventuring in their city. Yeah, and let them go and let them, just explore and see what you do. um you know Ideally too, I mean, I go over, I've got 2 pages dedicated to the types of horror games that, the book is specifically, or how to use it for those. And it could easily be used as a kind of monster of the week game. I mean, easily,
Yeah.
you don't have to set up, you know there could be just individual one shots of each week. You could do zombie, survival horror with it easily. I mean, you just wreck the world, put some skeletons and zombies in there, and here you go. I mean, use it for that. I mean, so
So speaking of the tables, that's one thing that really stood out to me is how many there actually are in this book. Which was your favorite to design, and which one presented the biggest challenge for you?
the biggest challenge is actually the very next to last one, the properties natural chart, because I wanted it to have a little bit of authenticity, but obviously, I mean, I'm not a practicing like Wiccan or a witch or or anything. And you do enough. I always believe in doing my research, and that table itself probably took a good 5 or 6 days of I wanted to try to be as respectful to these people, to people's beliefs, and then to general look. Some of the stuff in the thing is just made up. Some of it's a a combination of things. Like we've got the bloodsuckers in there as a vampire, but it mentions that there's just one type of vampire. And if we hit the stretch goals, I'm going to do a Romanian style vampire, and I'm going to do a Albanian style vampire.
Nice.
In my fantasy book, I have a kid, a young gentleman I work with from, he is a kid actually, I've been mentoring him, but that lives in Uganda. And he did a stretch goal on my last Kickstarter for me. And I let him write one, and me and him have bounced off ideas for monsters that are, kind of African based, folklore based. And
Nice.
so we put an African style vampire in the fantasy book, um, from me, collaboration with him. So just because this is the bloodsucker I presented in this book doesn't mean that every other type doesn't exist as well. But so same with the tables. I um that one, you look up one witch site or one, and no one should ever look through my browser history. So I'm sure most other fantasy and game writers will say. But they may say that, Dragon's Foot is good for this or this or this, you know? But then another one might say it's good for this, you know? And it's like, so eventually I kind of just took notes. And if a website, if multiple resources said, basil is good for this, then that's what property I gave basil.
Cool.
If and so that one was a little challenging because it was real research. The as far as fun, I really like the I did the there's a bunch of different type of ghosts in there and stuff, and so one of them is a vengeful spirit, and I wanted to do a version of it that was like an ancient spirit. And so that one I liked a lot, just coming up with different combinations of why when they died in the past, who they were in the past, what kind of madness, you know what I mean, like has crept over them, from being trapped, or what are they trapped in? Are they trapped in a bottle? Are they trapped in a box? Are they trapped in a book? Are they, what went wrong? Was it a spell that went wrong? What do they think about our society? Because you got to think, you're a spirit and you wake up and it's been 1,000 years. You're
Where
going to
am
look
I?
around and
Yeah.
say, do you like this? Do you not like it? Do like, and stuff. And so that one I had a lot of fun with. I did like doing the haunted house one. I liked most of the other ones were just fun. Make a list and then whittle it down to, like you said, 7 to 8 charts of 1 die 6 rolls, and so it was almost and then formatting, it was like, okay, that's all I can do. So like you got a list of 10 great things and you're like, oh no, I gotta get rid of 4. You're like, oh, $1 PDFs later on. I can
Yeah.
do I can do D66 charts for a haunted house later on for $1, or whatever. So you start thinking like that if they can keep all your other list ideas off to the side. So but yeah, I like that kind of thing. I think I think it helps newer, especially newer GMs or guides. I think it helps them, even people that are been designing games for or running games forever. I mean, sometimes they get, oh, I gotta do a one shot tomorrow night at the local game store, and oh,
Yeah.
okay, good
Roll
to
it
go.
up real quick and you got your one
Yeah,
shot.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and then especially like you said with these rules, it's a matter of just going with the flow, and as long as you've got a couple of the monsters picked out, everything else can just be done, either just role play it or give it, if it's something that just has to have a role, give it a DR, difficulty rating, and go from there. I mean, it's easy. I mean, there's no firm rule, there's no like just keep your game moving
Yeah.
kind of thing,
And it seems
so
like this system like does that. It just the way you've built everything just enables everything to boom, 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 go, and
it
it's,
did, and I think part of it came from, like I said, I play tested it, with people that we weren't their first language, and that had only had very minimal role playing game experience. Now I loved Lviv. Lviv was great because it had two really good gaming stores. You'd be surprised. I mean, like filled with, but mainly fifth edition Dungeons and Dragon books, and then like a bunch of board games, a lot of Warhammer. Um, but very little other than that, and stuff. But it was a really vibrant scene, and stuff. And but like once I started running this with them, with the rules being they just had to say, this is what I want to do. I mean, like, they're trapped on one of the wild world in this space setting, where there's weird dinosaurs and stuff. And, they would just be like, "Oh, I gotta, I want to do da 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 da," and okay, and they didn't have to sit there and consult their sheet and think, "Oh, what's the rule for?" Just tell me what you're doing. I'll give you a quick.
Quick
Is it
TR,
easy?
and we got it.
Yeah. Is it easy, hard, simple? Do you even need to roll? I
Right.
mean, great plan. And then you describe what happens, and you just, they feel good. They're like, oh, I came up with a great plan. And to me as a guide, I'm like, man, that'll work. Why do they need to, why do they need to roll? I mean, like that's a good plan and that will work. So, um, you give it to them. I mean, and it makes it fun. They go home saying, "Oh, I did this and this and this,"
Yeah.
and I was, instead of, like with, some games, it's just, everything has gotta, you know, I don't know. Sometimes I get like, oh, I want to talk my way into the, past the guard, and DM's like, okay, what do you say? And you're like, blah, blah, blah. And the DM says, well, it's not really good enough, but roll anyway. And then you roll and you get a 20. And it's like, okay, so then the role playing BS you just spouted
Was
wasn't good
meaningless.
enough, but
Right.
because you rolled a 20,
Yeah.
you get it, and I don't know. I mean, like, I don't particularly, I think it should be a little bit more kind of back and forth and a little bit fun,
Oh,
and
I
stuff.
agree with you fully
Yeah.
on that one. So, if there was anyone out there that's listening or watches this before the Kickstarter ends that might still be undecided on backing the horror compendium, what would you say to them?
Um, I would say as a PDF or, at minimum, or just on its own, I think that, like I've said, you could honestly, you could take most of the stuff that's in it and you could really, you could run it with something like Into the Odd or Knave or the Black Hack would work really well with it. You could certainly, there's enough there that you could easily convert it into those rules.
Oh,
A horror book that has got a lot of good ideas in it, I think, and some good, uh, good art, and eh, I think you could run a really nice game with it, even if you didn't have the core misadventure rules. I think it's certainly a good book of ideas and to set up a game and run a game with. Uh, Other than that, I mean, like I said, I think that there's with the core rules, um, I've had a lot of fun running it. I mean, people currently with all the hubbub going on, with Wizards of the Coast and stuff. I kind of this is one of the other reasons I wrote these rules a while back was just because I wanted to have the flexibility to write any setting that I wanted to write and any, I mean, not that I'm not the kind of person I'm not trying to write some crazy, I don't know, something bad, like I mean, nothing like that. But like I said, I wanted with the open magic system and stuff, it allows me to. I've got a really big project that I've been working on for about a year and a half, like a totally original kind of fantasy post-apocalyptic world building book. It's kind of weird, but and so I needed a rule set that would work for it, and this one does. And so um, I think it's a good rule set if you want your players to be creative and you want to run fast. Um, it can be deadly. I mean, with the bell curve, if the monsters are, you know, strong enough, or the adversaries are strong enough and stuff, they're gonna hit back just as good as you get, just as good as you get.
yep.
And and your characters aren't ever, unless you want it to be super powered. Look, there's an option in there. If you want, like in a fantasy setting, you want to keep improving magic to where like fireball can go up to level 6 and 8. There's a way to keep making things more powerful. There's a way to you allow them to just keep building hit points per level. Say every 2 sessions you're going to go up a level and you'll get this many build points and you get one hit die. You can do that, and you could certainly run it to have the same feel as, say, like 5e or or Pathfinder, where the characters are bulkier and stronger and stuff. You could certainly hack the system that direction, or you can leave it more OSR, more deadly, know when to run, know when to be safe, kind of way as well. I mean, so it kind of goes both, I think you can get a lot out of it. I mean, I have. I mean, I've stuck to genres that I know that it works well. I've fiddled around with a superpower version and I didn't like it, so I don't think I'll ever do a supers, version of it. But space for sure. At some point we'll do. And then I've got it, like I said, I've got like 2 setting books that, where I'm gonna go more, here's an actual, world, here's more of an actual play style in the future with them. But I needed to have these kind of core books out with the core ideas before I could, you know, introduce those. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Nice. Well, I feel like we kind of covered a lot here today. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to touch on before we wrap it up?
Um, no, I think we talked about a lot. I mean, I'm glad I finally got to discuss it with somebody, and and stuff. I really appreciate the positivity and the chance to talk about it and whatnot.
I've already got
Um,
ideas brewing up here of how to use
yeah,
this
no, I
system.
like I said,
So
yeah. Yeah, I think like I said, I think there's a lot that, like I said, I left it in, I left it in the common, uh, for everybody to use. I mean, that's the idea, is to hack it and to kind of do something, something of their own with it. So now they've got, there's fantasy stuff out there. The adversary book, I think, in the fantasy book is worth picking up. I mean, especially if you um, just want something different. In it, every like every adversary type has at a minimum 3 different takes on it. So and a lot of those are from here over in Romania and like Ukraine, and then there's some African versions from that I collaborated with Patrick on, and so something like a goblin isn't, you've got a goblin or a Lico, and I forgot what else I put in there, but a Lico is the Ukrainian version of a goblin essentially, and they have one eye, and
mm,
uh, they're they have a certain, they're all magically kind of inclined and stuff. And so, and it's like that with everything. There's 3 different types of, there's different types of vampires in there. There's, under like the undead, like with zombies, there's fast zombies, slow zombies, and, like, so, um, it's worth picking up too, just as far as for that section. If you just want some new stuff to throw, throw at your, throw at your players that you haven't seen before, that they haven't seen before. It's got some stuff in it, and the stretch goals for this are going to be similar to that. I'm going to, if we can hit the stretch goals, we're going to do a kind of a journal of a bunch of different monsters from around the world in there, so that you can add some variety to the Rusaka from Ukraine, and We've got some Albanian stuff in there
Nice.
from I was previously married to an Albanian for 10 years and did a lot of research on that culture with while I was with her. And we, uh, so there's a bunch of, you know, just things from my travels around the world that I've come across and weird things and stuff. So the stretch goals should be a lot of fun if we can get to those. And if we can get to the main stretch goal, we'll be doing the book in color. We've already got it set up as color as it is. So, we'd like to be able to afford to do it in color. Unfortunately, I got a little crazy on the page count on it. It is a big hefty book. I mean, it's for a zine. I mean, it's A4 size at 72 pages. So it's a good resource book, I think, if nothing else
Yes.
for horror. For you want a good golden age kind of fun horror book that can be just torn apart for ideas.
This is
There
it.
you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, so
Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Mark. I really appreciate it. I mean, I saw this book and I was just like, I got to talk to this guy. So,
no, I
um,
appreciate it. I appreciate it very, very much. I know, man.
and folks, if you enjoyed the video today, give it a thumbs up, maybe subscribe to the channel. Be sure to check out the, boy, talk about the brain going off there. There we go. The MisAdventure Horror Compendium. There's a link to the Kickstarter below in the description, so you can check that out and back this awesome project and get it to full color. And